Hey everyone. Tonight we begin not with steel or gunpowder, but with a battered tin cup of vodka trembling in frozen hands. Picture a Red Army trench at an unforgiving -40 degrees. Men cough, eyes bloodshot. As commissars pour out their 200 grams of courage, they'll stagger forward, half drunk, half terrified. But in the brutal calculus of war, entirely expendable. This wasn't just fuel for bravery, it was control, addiction, and often a death sentence from morphine needles that turned screams into dreamlike smiles, to samagon brewed from kerosene and gun oil. The Soviet front was a battlefield of chemicals as much as bullets. And when vodka ran dry, soldiers smoked makorka so harsh it felt more like poison than comfort. These aren't the heroic legends the USSR wanted remembered. These are the forgotten highs and hidden overdoses that haunted men long after the guns fell silent. If you want the darkest truths of history unburied, like and subscribe. And tell me, what hidden cost of war do you think gets buried the most? The biting wind whistles through the gaps in the frozen earth, carrying the scent of damp soil and distant smoke. You're huddled in a trench, the cold seeping into your very bones, a relentless ache that no amount of heavy wool can truly conquer. Your breath condenses into fleeting clouds, a visible testament to air that bites at exposed skin. This isn't just cold, it's an incapacitating chill, reaching down to the marrow, making every movement a deliberate, painful effort. Before you, the commissar's silhouette cuts a stark figure against the leaden sky. His rough voice carries a strange weight, a promise and a threat intertwined. With a practiced hand, he pours a measure of raw, fiery vodka into waiting tin cups. It's a ritual, a silent understanding passing between him and the rows of weary men. For you, the sight of that clear, potent liquid is a momentary flicker of warmth in the desolate landscape. You watch it splash into your cup, catching the sparse, weak light, a swirling eddy in the tarnished metal. This isn't just a drink, it's the 200 grams of courage, a desperate antidote to the gnawing fear and paralyzing cold that threatens to consume you. You lift the cup, the metal rim cold against your lips, and the first sip is a shock. It burns, a searing fire racing down your throat, awakening dormant nerves, chasing away the numbness, if only for a few fleeting moments. The taste is harsh, unrefined, scraping against your palate, leaving a lingering bitterness, but also a profound, immediate warmth spreading through your chest. It's an illusion, this internal fire, but in this moment, it feels like a lifeline. The tension in your shoulders loosens. The tremor in your hands starts to subside. For a brief breath, the world softens at its edges, around you. Other men cough as the vodka takes hold. Their faces, gaunt and etched with fatigue, begin to relax. Some even manage a strained, fleeting smile. You see the glint of bloodshot eyes now holding a spark, perhaps resolve, or simply surrender. The initial jolt gives way to a dulling of the senses, a blurring of harsh realities. The roar of distant artillery, usually a gut-wrenching tremor, recedes into a less immediate threat, muffled by the rising tide of ethanol. It's a dangerous shield. This liquid courage, one that leaves you staggering, unbalanced, your footing unsure on the icy ground. Yet, when the order comes, when the whistle screams its shrill command, you will hoist yourself over the trench lip. You will step into the fire, propelled not just by duty, but by a chemical haze, half drunk, half terrified. But in the brutal calculus of war, entirely expendable. This vodka, at -40 degrees, replaces the blood you feel slowly draining from you, from the collective veins of this army. It's a cruel paradox, this forced intoxication. You might even hear the whispered gallows humor among your comrades, a dark joke that Stalin, unlike Hitler with his Pervitin, preferred to intoxicate entire divisions with cheap vodka. There are stories, hushed and disbelieving, of men so thoroughly drunk, so profoundly detached, that they would stand laughing a grotesque, unsettling sound, even as shells shrieked and tore the earth around them. You might witness it yourself. A figure swaying precariously, a strange, hollow chuckle escaping their lips, oblivious, or perhaps simply uncaring, to the chaos engulfing them. It's not bravery, not truly, but a chemically induced indifference, a temporary escape from the crushing weight of reality. The immediate fear is dulled, replaced by a numbing fog, a heavy blanket that smothers the instinct for self-preservation, urging you forward, into the uncertain, deadly expanse. As the brutal symphony of battle gives way to an eerie, echoing quiet, another kind of chemical intervention emerges far rarer, far more precious, yet equally fraught with profound dangers. This is the realm of morphine, a substance whispered about in hushed tones, its very name carrying a heavy weight of both relief and dread. You might not see it often, this small, unassuming syringe, but its legend precedes it, a potent, almost mythical cure for the unbearable, reserved strictly for the gravely wounded, for those whose screams pierce the very fabric of the desolate landscape, for whom pain has become a living, breathing entity, a monstrous companion in their final moments or in the agonizing aftermath of an injury. Imagine the scene: a makeshift aid station, perhaps a dugout crudely fashioned from logs and earth. The air thick with the metallic tang of blood and the pervasive scent of antiseptic. You might observe a soldier, his face contorted in an agony that rips through the senses, his cries raw and primal, echoing off the rough-hewn walls. His body trembles uncontrollably, a human instrument played by the excruciating pain of shattered bone or gaping wound. Then, the doctor, his face weary, his eyes shadowed with the weight of impossible decisions, approaches with a small vial, a precious glass vessel containing a clear, viscous liquid. With a steady hand, he administers the injection. The transformation is almost instantaneous, a stark, unsettling shift. The screams, which moments ago filled the air with their sharp, jagged edges, begin to soften, to recede, as if pulled back by an invisible current. The rigid tension in the soldier's body eases. The frantic tremors slowly diminish. You watch as the tortured lines on his face smooth out, the grimace giving way to a startling, dreamlike smile. It's a smile of pure, unadulterated relief. A sudden, blissful detachment from the physical torment that just seconds before had held him captive. His eyes, though still unfocused, might now hold a distant, serene quality, as if he has drifted away to some private, internal landscape, far removed from the horror around him. This single injection, you realize, has not just dulled the pain, it has created a temporary, gentle veil, a ticket to somewhere beyond the immediate suffering. But in this grim theater of war, even this profound relief comes with a shadow. The doctors, overburdened and under-resourced, often bore the crushing responsibility of deciding who truly deserved this final, precious high. Was it for the one who still held a flicker of hope for survival? Or for the one whose wounds were clearly mortal, offering them a merciful, if temporary, escape from a pain that could never truly be healed? This moral dilemma hung heavy in the air, a silent, unspoken burden carried by those who tried to alleviate suffering amidst unimaginable destruction. For those who survived, who made it back from the front lines, the morphine sometimes left an indelible mark, a craving that lingered long after the physical wounds had closed. You might encounter veterans in the years that followed, their eyes holding a particular, haunted emptiness, a silent testament to a hidden epidemic. They would return, carrying not just the visible scars of battle, but an invisible dependence, a profound emptiness that only the drug could seem to fill. The official files, ever keen to maintain a facade of strength, would disguise these cases, labeling them as nervous breakdowns or shell shock, carefully omitting any mention of the insidious addiction that truly gripped them. It was a dark, unspoken truth, a secret burden carried by countless individuals. The grim humor of the time might even call it the invisible medal. For if you received that precious shot, it often meant that half your life, or at least a significant part of your former self, was already tragically gone, leaving behind a new, challenging battle. As the war dragged on, the relentless demands of the front consumed everything, and even the 200 grams of courage became a luxury, a memory. When the official rations of vodka ran dry, a new kind of desperation took root, birthing an insidious ingenuity born of survival and a profound need for escape. This was the era of homemade highs, of concoctions brewed in the bleakest corners of the trenches, under the watchful, indifferent gaze of the moon. You hear the whispers, you see the furtive movements, the clandestine gatherings, as soldiers became alchemists of despair, transforming anything that could ferment into a crude, potent moonshine, a substance they called samagon. Imagine the stark reality, the bitter cold, the gnawing hunger, the constant threat of death. In such an environment, the human spirit, desperate for even a moment's respite, will seek it anywhere. You might witness a small, makeshift fire, carefully hidden, illuminating the gaunt faces of men gathered around a bubbling tin can or a rusty bucket. The air would be thick with strange, acrid fumes, a chemical bouquet that spoke of improvised stills and dangerous ingredients. Gasoline, with its sharp, metallic tang, kerosene, with its oily, pervasive odor, industrial alcohol, often siphoned from engine parts or medical supplies, all became potential components in this trench moonshine. These weren't ingredients for comfort. They were poisons, willingly consumed, a gamble against the odds. You might even hear the more disturbing stories, the whispered tales of men so utterly desperate, so beyond the pale of conventional reasoning, that they would mix gunpowder with water, creating a dark, grainy slurry, and drink it for a rush. The sheer audacity of such an act, the raw, reckless courage, or perhaps the complete absence of it, is almost unfathomable. What kind of state must a mind be in to knowingly ingest such a volatile, destructive mixture? You can almost taste the metallic grit, feel the tremor through your body, the strange, fleeting jolt that would follow. A desperate, dangerous gamble for a few moments of altered perception. The side effects were horrifying. a grim testament to the potent toxicity of these homemade brews. You hear stories of blindness, a sudden, terrifying darkness descending upon a soldier who had imbibed too much of the poisoned liquor. There are accounts of violent seizures, bodies thrashing uncontrollably on the muddy ground. A terrifying spectacle that would strike fear into the hearts of even the most hardened veterans. And then there were the hallucinations, perhaps the cruelest of all. You might see a man staring intently at the pristine white snow, his eyes wide and vacant, muttering about it being bread, reaching out with trembling hands to scoop handfuls of the frozen flakes, attempting to eat them, believing he has found sustenance in the desolate landscape. It's a tragic vision, a chilling glimpse into the utter breakdown of mind and body under the combined assault of war and self-poisoning. One particularly grim story circulates among the men, a stark warning, though often ignored in the face of such profound despair. A platoon, heavily intoxicated on engine fuel, their minds ravaged by the crude alcohol, turned on itself in a fog of confusion and paranoia. They mistook their own comrades for the enemy, firing wildly, senselessly, at each other. The sounds of friendly fire, the screams of men dying not from enemy bullets, but from the poisoned haze in their own minds, is a horror that lingers long after the telling. The dark humor that threads through these tales is a bitter one. Countless men, facing down the most lethal army in the world, were not killed by German bullets, but by their own desperate attempts at escape, by the fake booze they brewed in the trenches. Even when the fierce, raw burn of vodka or the dangerous concoctions of samagon were beyond reach, there was another, more pervasive, more constant companion in the trenches: Majorca, a cheap, harsh tobacco. But in the desolate world of the front, it was a precious commodity, a small, tangible solace. You might first notice its ubiquitous scent, a pungent, earthy aroma that clung to everything, to uniforms, to dugouts, to the very air of the trenches. It wasn't the refined, delicate smell of pipe tobacco. This was raw, unadulterated, the very essence of a working man's smoke, rough around the edges, but deeply satisfying in its own way. You see it everywhere: men with calloused fingers, rolling the coarse, dry leaves into thin, irregular cigarettes using scraps of newspaper or any available paper. The skill is honed by repetition, a small, intricate dance of tobacco and paper that becomes almost automatic. A flick of a match, a deep, satisfying inhale, and a plume of thick, grayish smoke billows out. The first drag is always a strong one, the Majorca scratching at your throat, eliciting a cough, perhaps, but immediately followed by a wave of calm, a momentary softening of the relentless anxieties that define trench life. It's a small ritual, a punctuation mark in the endless monotony and terror. The craving for Majorca was profound, a constant hum beneath the surface of consciousness. You hear stories, quiet confessions, of men trading their meager bread rations, the very sustenance they needed to survive, just for a few precious rolls of this rough tobacco. The choice was stark, a fleeting moment of peace, a familiar sensation in a world stripped bare of comfort or the gnawing hunger that would inevitably return. For many, the mental relief outweighed the physical need, a testament to the power of ritual and addiction in extreme circumstances. The trenches themselves, particularly during quieter periods, would become thick with this smoke, a low-hanging Soviet fog that clung to the air, obscuring vision, muffling sounds, creating a strange, ethereal atmosphere. You are enveloped in it, the acrid scent permeating your clothes, your hair, even the taste in your mouth. It's a collective cloud, a shared experience, a silent bond between men who had little else in common beyond their shared predicament. The smoke, curling upwards into the gray sky, seems to carry with it the unspoken burdens, the silent fears, and the fleeting hopes of every soldier below. For many who survived, the Majorca addiction became a lifelong companion, a habit deeply ingrained, carried far beyond the front lines. You would see veterans in the post-war years, their fingers stained yellow, the perpetual scent of cheap tobacco clinging to them, a living memory of their time in the trenches. It was a physical manifestation of a psychological imprint, a constant reminder of a world they had endured, a comfort they had clung to. The dark humor of the era encapsulated its necessity without Majorca. The trench was as silent, as desolate, as unforgiving as a graveyard, its emptiness broken only by the chilling whispers of the wind. Its smoke, however harsh, filled a void that nothing else could. The brutal ebb and flow of the front lines often presented unexpected, almost surreal, opportunities. After a successful counterattack, after pushing back the enemy through mud and blood, there came the grim task of securing newly captured territory. This often meant scavenging, resupplying from the vanquished. And it was in these moments that Red Army troops sometimes stumbled upon an alien substance, a chemical curiosity from the German medical depots. You might be there, sifting through the debris of a recently abandoned enemy position, the air still thick with the smell of cordite and burning wood. Amidst the scattered equipment and discarded rations, you might find small, unassuming boxes, neatly labeled, containing rows of small, white pills, Pervitin. The German Wehrmacht had famously relied on this stimulant, often dubbed Blitzkrieg dope, to fuel their relentless, lightning-fast advances. For many Red Army soldiers, however, it was an unknown, a mysterious item in the enemy's arsenal. Curiosity, in the harsh crucible of war, can be a powerful driver. You might see a comrade, perhaps emboldened by victory or simply desperate for any edge, pocketing a few of these pills, wondering about their purpose. The language on the packaging is foreign, but the intent seems clear. These are medicines, intended for strength, for focus. The effects, once ingested, were profound and startlingly immediate. You hear the accounts, the hushed whispers of men who had dared to try the Wehrmacht pills. Within an hour or so, a strange energy would begin to surge through their bodies. Sleep, a constant, gnawing desire in the trenches, would become a distant, almost laughable concept. For 3 days straight, you might observe a soldier who had taken the Pervitin, moving with an unnatural vigor, his eyes wide and unblinking, his movements sharp, almost manic. They would speak with an accelerated cadence, their thoughts racing, their every action imbued with an intense, almost feverish energy. This surge of artificial adrenaline would translate into frantic, manic charges, a relentless, almost unstoppable drive forward. You might witness a comrade, usually fatigued, suddenly possessed by an indefatigable spirit, pushing on through exhaustion, through pain, performing feats of endurance that defied the natural limits of the human body. It was a horrifying spectacle, a glimpse into a chemically altered state of being, where fear and fatigue were temporarily banished, replaced by a relentless, almost robotic drive. But then, as abruptly as it began, the effects would dissipate. The crash was brutal, devastating. You would see these same soldiers, after days of unnatural wakefulness and manic activity, collapse like corpses, their bodies utterly spent, their minds reeling from the forced exertion. They would sleep for hours, sometimes days, a profound, almost comatose slumber, their bodies desperately trying to recover from the immense strain placed upon them. The irony of the situation was a bitter pill to swallow. Here were Red Army soldiers, fighting tooth and nail against the Nazi regime, often unknowingly fueling their own counterattacks with the very same blitzkrieg dope that had powered the initial enemy onslaughts. It was a bizarre, almost grotesque twist of fate, a hidden dimension to the brutal conflict, the dark humor, ever present, even in the most grim circumstances, would quip that a part of their victory, a hidden, unspoken percentage of their hard-won triumphs, was subtly fueled by this made-in-Germany meth, a strange, unexpected legacy of the enemy's own chemical warfare. As the war progressed, the lifeline of Lend-lease aid from the Western Allies began to flow into the Soviet Union, bringing with it not just vital machinery and supplies, but also, sometimes, unexpected chemical companions. Nestled within American medical kits, among bandages and antiseptics, a new substance occasionally appeared: benzodrine. For Soviet soldiers, accustomed to the raw, visceral burn of vodka or the illicit kick of homemade samagon, these neatly packaged Western stay-awake pills were a curious and initially perplexing discovery. You might stumble upon them yourself. Small, unfamiliar tablets, perhaps with English labels that were unreadable, but whose purpose quickly became evident through observation and whispered experimentation. Imagine the grueling reality of a night march, the relentless darkness, the freezing cold that penetrates layers of clothing, the profound exhaustion that weighs down every limb, every thought. Your eyes burn from lack of sleep, your muscles ache with a deep, persistent fatigue, and the mind struggles to remain alert, to process the endless, repetitive rhythm of your boots on frozen ground. In these desperate moments, when the body screams for rest but duty demands unwavering progression, the benzodrine pills offered a tantalizing, almost miraculous solution. You might see a comrade, visibly fading, on the verge of collapsing from sheer fatigue. Swallow one of these pills. The effect, while less dramatic than Pervitin, was subtly profound. The immediate rush was replaced by a sustained, almost gentle lift. The profound weariness would slowly, almost imperceptibly, begin to recede. The heavy eyelids would feel lighter, the dull ache in your muscles would lessen, and your mind, previously a muddled fog, would regain a surprising clarity. You could march for what felt like an eternity, for 72 hours straight, pushing through the night, then through the day, and then through another night, your body defying its natural limits. The world seemed sharper, the cold less biting, the distant sounds of battle more distinct, yet somehow less threatening. It was a focused, relentless energy, a powerful tool for extending endurance. This dirty secret was never officially admitted by the Soviet Union. In the grand narrative of unwavering socialist resolve and physical fortitude, the idea that Red Army soldiers relied on Western stimulants for endurance would have been anathema. You would never find it in official reports, never read about it in glowing commendations. It remained in the shadows. A quiet understanding shared among those who experienced its effects. A practical solution to an urgent problem, kept carefully out of sight from the watchful eyes of the state. The grim humor of the time might offer a knowing wink. The Allies didn't just send tanks and planes through Lend-lease. They also sent nervous fuel, a subtle, powerful assistance that helped keep the wheels of war turning, quite literally, through the darkest hours. This hidden contribution, this silent ally in the struggle against fatigue, added another layer of complexity to the often simplistic historical accounts of the war. Beyond its role as a shield against cold and fear, beyond its capacity to induce courage or a temporary, desperate high, vodka held a deeper, more insidious power within the Red Army. It was a tool of control, an invisible whip wielded by the commissars. You might initially see it as a simple ration, a practical necessity. But as you spend more time in the trenches, you begin to discern the subtle, yet potent, mechanisms of its distribution. It wasn't simply handed out uniformly. Its flow was regulated, carefully managed, becoming a potent instrument of reward and punishment, loyalty and suspicion. Imagine the atmosphere of quiet desperation that permeated the trenches. Men starved for warmth, for relief, for any escape from the relentless grind. In this environment, the promise of vodka became a powerful motivator. You observe the commissars, their expressions stern, their movements deliberate. They would reward the loyal, those who showed exemplary courage, those who followed orders without question, with an extra measure, a generous pour that made them the envy of their comrades. You might feel a pang of longing yourself, watching as a particularly obedient soldier receives his slightly larger portion, a clear sign of favor, a tangible mark of his compliance. Conversely, the suspect, those whose loyalty was doubted, those who showed signs of wavering, those who questioned orders, might find their ration withheld entirely, or at least significantly reduced. This denial, a silent, powerful rebuke, would be a cold, sober reminder of their precarious position, a subtle form of psychological pressure designed to bring them back into line. You might witness the tight-lipped expressions of men denied, the quiet resentment simmering beneath the surface, yet knowing full well the consequences of any open defiance. Vodka, in this context, was not just alcohol. It was a potent currency of power, a visible sign of one's standing and obedience. The tactical implications were clear, if chilling. Drunk soldiers, their senses dulled, their inhibitions lowered, were often braver, or perhaps simply too numb, too disoriented to refuse orders. You can picture it, men stumbling forward, their minds clouded by ethanol, their fears supplanted by a reckless, chemically induced bravado. They might charge into situations that a sober man would instinctively recoil from, driven not by clear-headed heroism, but by the intoxicating fog that had settled over their judgment. The commissar's invisible whip, a silent force, ensured compliance, transforming uncertainty into a numb, relentless advance. Alcohol, you come to realize, was not merely a morale booster. It was an enabler of obedience, a silent persuader that bypassed the rational mind and went straight for the primal impulses. The dark humor of the time, often cynical and world-weary, would note that Stalin ruled not only with the iron fist of political power and military might, but also with the insidious, pervasive influence of ethanol. It was a potent combination, a silent alliance between political control and chemical manipulation. This system of control, subtle yet profoundly effective, added another layer of complexity to the Red Army's operations, a hidden dimension to its structure of command. You understand that in this brutal war, even something as seemingly innocuous as a drink could be twisted into a powerful instrument of power, shaping destinies and dictating actions in ways that defied simple heroism. In the crucible of the Eastern Front, there existed an even more desperate echelon of fighters, a shadow army composed of prisoners and penal battalions, men deemed utterly expendable, thrown into the meat grinder of the front with little hope and even fewer resources. These condemned souls found the already meager rations of vodka or the possibility of acquiring morphine virtually non-existent. Stripped of almost everything, they resorted to the most desperate, most primal forms of escape, crafting their own highs from whatever flammable detritus they could scavenge. You hear the stories, whispered in the flickering firelight. Tales of men so utterly devoid of comfort that they sought solace in the most improbable, most dangerous of substances. Imagine their plight: the gnawing hunger, a constant, debilitating ache, the freezing cold. More intense for those without proper gear, and the ever-present threat of a bullet, either from the enemy or, just as likely, from their own side if they faltered. In such a void, the instinct for survival intertwines with the desperate craving for oblivion. You might observe them, gaunt figures with haunted eyes, meticulously gathering anything that could burn and produce a smoke. Dried leaves, brittle and brown, collected from the sparse, shattered trees, sticky resin, scraped from pine barks, its scent sharp and earthy, even scraps of rags, soaked in industrial fuel or kerosene, their very fumes a potent, toxic promise. These makeshift materials would be crudely rolled, or simply placed in a pipe fashioned from a hollowed-out piece of wood, and then lit. The smoke, thick and acrid, would fill the air, not with the familiar tang of makorka, but with a harsh, chemical bite. You might witness a man inhaling deeply, his lungs burning, his eyes closing, seeking a moment of peace, a brief respite from the agonizing reality of his existence. Some, in their ultimate desperation, would even improvise ways to inhale makeshift opium smoke, somehow concocted from unknown sources, to dull the relentless pangs of hunger, to momentarily forget the hollow emptiness in their bellies. It was a macabre alchemy, turning potential poisons into temporary balms, a testament to the human capacity for seeking escape, even when surrounded by total despair. These men, these forgotten soldiers from the gulags, formed a shadow army whose existence and suffering were meticulously erased from official history. You won't find their stories in heroic sagas or official records. Their acts of desperation deemed unworthy of remembrance. They fought not for ideology, not for the motherland in any patriotic sense, but for the basic, primal need to survive another day. And paradoxically, for a cheap puff, a fleeting moment of artificial warmth or mental detachment. Their battles were fought on two fronts against the enemy, and against the crushing weight of their own despair. Their addiction to these crude, dangerous highs, a symptom of a deeper wound. The dark humor, stark and unforgiving, would suggest that these men didn't fight for grand ideals, but for the fleeting relief found in a harsh, stolen breath. Their legacy is one of silent suffering, a forgotten testament to the extreme lengths to which the human spirit will go to find even the most dangerous forms of solace. The cumulative effect of these widespread chemical crutches from the sanctioned vodka to the illicit samagon and stolen stimulants, inevitably led to darker, more tragic consequences on the battlefield. Beyond the individual suffering, there were incidents that ripped through the very fabric of unit cohesion, sowing chaos and adding a horrifying layer of self-inflicted damage to the already brutal realities of war. You hear the whispers, the hushed accounts of soldiers, their minds and bodies ravaged by the potent, toxic brew of homemade samagon, collapsing mid-battle. One moment, a comrade is stumbling forward, rifle in hand. The next, he's a heap on the frozen ground, his body giving out, no longer able to sustain the illusion of strength, a sudden, ignominious end. Imagine the confusion, the terrifying unpredictability in the heat of combat. You are amidst the roar of gunfire, the screams of men, the ground shaking with explosions, and then a figure beside you simply gives way, not from a bullet, but from an internal chemical collapse. It's a jarring, disorienting sight, adding another layer of fear and uncertainty to an already chaotic environment. These were not isolated incidents. The stories proliferate, creating a grim tapestry of accidental self-destruction. Even more horrifying were the accounts of entire units, their judgment thoroughly compromised by alcohol, firing wildly, senselessly, into their own men. You can try to picture the scene, the fog of war compounded by the fog of intoxication. A group of soldiers, their perceptions warped, their fear heightened and twisted, mistaking their own comrades for the enemy in the swirling smoke and confusion. The sounds of friendly fire, the sudden, inexplicable screams from what should be your own lines, the realization that danger isn't just coming from the front, but from within your own ranks. It's a chilling thought, a profound betrayal not by a person, but by a chemical, a silent, unseen enemy that turned brother against brother. These were not discipline issues in the conventional sense, but symptoms of a deeper, systemic reliance on mind-altering substances. Official reports, ever careful to maintain the myth of the invincible Red Army, would meticulously bury these incidents. They would be chalked up as discipline issues, instances of cowardice, or perhaps even desertion, anything to avoid confronting the pervasive, corrosive reality of widespread substance abuse. The truth, however, lingered in the memories of those who lived through it. Veterans, in the quiet, reflective years long after the guns had fallen silent, would sometimes admit the grim reality: overdose, self-poisoning, and the chaos induced by intoxication had claimed more comrades than stray shells or enemy bullets. You hear them speak in hushed tones, their eyes distant, revealing a secret history, a hidden cost that far outstripped what was ever recorded in official documents. The dark humor, sharper and more painful now, would acknowledge the bitter truth: the Red Army's invisible enemy, the one that stalked through its ranks with silent, deadly precision, was often the bottle itself, a constant, insidious threat from within. When the great conflict finally ceased, when the last shots were fired and the victors returned home, the war, for countless individuals, did not truly end. The profound reliance on alcohol and drugs, born of desperation in the trenches, festered into a silent, devastating epidemic that swept through the returning veterans. You would see them, thousands upon thousands, men who had faced down tanks and artillery, now ruined, not by enemy fire, but by the invisible scars of alcoholism and morphine addiction. Their bodies carried the visible wounds of battle, but their minds and spirits bore deeper, more insidious damage, a toxic inheritance from the war. The state, eager to rebuild and to glorify its hard-won victory, chose to officially overlook this pervasive suffering. Addiction, a word carrying shame and weakness, was not acknowledged. Instead, you would hear their struggles framed as nervous weakness, a vague, sanitizing term that allowed the authorities to maintain the illusion of a robust, healthy populace. The reality, however, was far grimier. You might encounter these men in the quiet corners of Soviet society, their lives a testament to the enduring grip of the substances that had once offered them fleeting solace. Their trembling hands, their distant gazes, the pervasive scent of cheap alcohol clinging to them. These were the unspoken indicators of a deep, unresolved trauma. The legacy of vodka, in particular, moved seamlessly from the brutal environment of the trenches into the fabric of Soviet daily life. What had been a wartime necessity, a 200 grams of courage, morphed into a pervasive social ritual, a cultural cornerstone, a toxic inheritance that would define generations. You would see the bottles on every table, at every celebration, at every commiseration, its consumption deeply ingrained. A constant echo of the wartime reliance. The habit, forged in the crucible of extreme stress and chemical dependency, became a societal norm, its roots stretching back to the frozen fields and muddy dugouts of the Eastern Front. The official myth of Soviet victory was meticulously constructed, built on pillars of heroism, unwavering resolve, and collective sacrifice. It was a narrative designed to inspire, to uplift, to forget the uncomfortable truths. But the reality, the unvarnished, brutal truth, was built on hangovers, on the deep, gnawing cravings of addiction, on the shattered lives of men who had fought not just with bullets, but with chemicals. Their heroism was real, their sacrifice immense. But it was often a heroism fueled by chemical haze, a sacrifice made possible by profound numbing. And so, as you reflect on this hidden history, you recognize that the Red Army's triumph, so often portrayed in stark, unblemished terms, was also profoundly soaked in blood, in booze, and in drugs. It's a complex, challenging truth, one that asks us to look beyond the surface of glorious narratives and to understand the profound, often tragic, human cost hidden beneath. And perhaps, as the echoes of those distant battles fade into the quiet of history, these truths, like faint whispers on the wind, will finally find their place in our understanding. You are there. Imagine the warmth of a gentle summer morning, the kind that promises a long, unhurried day. Perhaps you are stirring in your small, modest apartment. The soft light of June 22, 1941, just beginning to filter through the curtains. The city outside, whether it's the bustling heart of Moscow or a quieter, more provincial town, is slowly waking to its familiar rhythms. You might hear the distant clang of a tram, the soft murmur of neighbors beginning their day, or the sweet, unassuming chirping of sparrows from a window box. There is an uneasy peace, a fragile quiet that has settled over the land after years of turbulent change. But beneath it, a subtle hum of anxiety has always persisted. You might have been pouring a simple cup of tea, perhaps preparing a meager breakfast of black bread and a few potatoes for your family, when the air around you seems to crackle. Suddenly, The familiar drone of the radio, usually a source of cheerful music or official pronouncements, turns somber, urgent, a voice, grave and resonating with a weight you instantly feel in your chest, announces the unthinkable Operation Barbarossa has begun. The German war machine, without warning, has shattered the fragile quietude. In that instant, the world, as you knew it, irrevocably shifts. The front lines, once a distant, abstract concept discussed in hushed tones, are no longer confined to maps or newsreels. They have, in a terrifying, visceral way, arrived directly at your doorstep, right there in your kitchen. You clutch the edge of the wooden table, the warmth of the tea in your hand forgotten, as a chill spreads through you, not from the temperature, but from the sudden, stark realization of what this means. Within a mere month, the implications become terrifyingly tangible. You recall the official notices, perhaps hastily tacked onto public bulletin boards, announcing the issuance of ration cards. Even before the war truly began to bite, these cards represented a scarcity that felt almost insulting. They promised meager portions, barely enough to sustain a working adult, let alone a growing child. You hold your first ration card, a small piece of paper that now dictates the very essence of your existence, and feel its fragility in your hand. It's not just a card, it's a stark symbol of a future defined by what you won't have. The initial allocations are already so sparse, a grim foretaste of the deprivations to come. Hunger, then, becomes the very first weapon wielded against you, not by an enemy soldier, but by the relentless march of events. You feel it first as a subtle gnawing, then as a constant companion in your stomach, a dull ache that grows sharper with each passing day. It's not just a physical sensation, it's a psychological burden, a shadow that falls over every thought, every plan, every conversation. The simple, taken-for-granted act of eating transforms into a profound, almost spiritual struggle. Daily life, once filled with small joys and worries, is abruptly reduced to a relentless battle for bread, for sustenance, for the sheer, grinding act of survival. You watch your children, their young faces already thinner, and the ache in your stomach twists with a deeper, more profound pain. The quiet moments of peace are gone, replaced by the quiet, persistent whisper of hunger, a new, unwelcome guest at every meal, or lack thereof. And still, the wind blows softly outside, oblivious to the profound shift in your world. You learn, through hushed whispers and fragments of grim news, about the chilling machinery behind the scarcity that has become your daily reality. It's not just the chaos of war, not just the disruptions inherent in conflict. No. You come to understand that this hunger, this pervasive, gnawing emptiness, is a deliberate, calculated strategy. Far from the battlefields, in the sterile offices of the German High Command, a horrifying blueprint known as the Hunger Plan was meticulously drafted. You try to imagine the cold, calculating minds that could conceive of such a thing, turning the very staff of life into a weapon of mass destruction. The objective, you learn, was brutally simple, terrifyingly efficient to feed the invading Wehrmacht, the German army, directly from the fertile fields of the Soviet Union. Your land, your harvests, your very sustenance were to be seized, not just for the needs of the invaders, but as a strategic maneuver to decimate the civilian population. You picture the vast golden wheat fields, the rich black earth that has sustained generations, now seen by the enemy not as a source of life for your people, but as a larder for their soldiers. It's a cruel irony, a perversion of nature's bounty. You might overhear a fragment of a quote, passed in a low voice among your neighbors, a chilling phrase attributed to the architects of this plan. Tens of millions will starve. The words hang in the cold air, a death sentence pronounced not with a gun, but with the absence of food. You feel a knot tighten in your stomach, a sickening blend of fear and outrage. This is not just collateral damage of war. This is a policy designed for extermination, using the most fundamental human need against an entire people. Food, in this grim new reality, is not nourishment or comfort. It is a weapon, as potent and destructive as any bomb or bullet. The scale of the horror slowly unfolds around you. You see it in the sunken eyes of your neighbors, in the skeletal frames of those who once walked with robust purpose. You witness the silent, agonizing toll. Millions begin to die, not in the fiery explosions of battle, not with the sharp, sudden impact of bullets, but slowly, inexorably, from the quiet terror of empty plates. You watch as strength ebbs away, as vibrant life fades into a whisper. Each death is a silent scream, a testament to the brutal efficacy of a plan that starved not just bodies, but spirits. The quiet of the hungry city is punctuated by the hushed whispers of grief, the soft, mournful cries of those who have lost loved ones, not to direct violence, but to the slow, agonizing grip of hunger. You carry these images with you, a heavy weight in your heart, as you, too, grapple with the ever-present threat of that same insidious weapon. You stand on the edge of your village, or perhaps peer from the window of a train as it crawls slowly through the devastated countryside. The air is thick with the acrid smell of smoke, a smell that now clings to everything, to your clothes, to your memory. You watch, with a heavy heart, as the land you know, the fields that have always provided, are deliberately laid waste. This is Stalin's scorched earth policy in action, a grim, desperate measure, a harrowing choice made in the face of an overwhelming invasion. Before retreating, your own forces are ordered to destroy everything that could possibly aid the advancing German army. You see it with your own eyes, the crops, once ripening under the summer sun, now blackened in smoldering heaps, the livestock, the precious cows and pigs that represented years of labor and the promise of future sustenance, driven away or, in many tragic cases, slaughtered and left behind. The tools, the simple plows and scythes essential for planting and harvest, broken or buried beyond use. It is a necessary evil. You understand. A strategic maneuver to deny the enemy any advantage, to create a desolate, inhospitable wasteland in their wake. But the cost, you realize with a sinking feeling, is immeasurable. While effective against the Germans, slowing their advance and denying them vital resources, this policy is devastating, catastrophically so, for you and your fellow civilians. You see the vast tracts of farmland, stretching as far as the eye can see, now barren, scorched, utterly devoid of life or hope. Almost half of the Soviet Union's grain acreage, the very foundation of your food supply, is gone, vanished in flames and destruction. You feel the earth beneath your feet, once vibrant and promising, now cold and silent, echoing with the loss. Families like yours watch, in stunned silence, as their harvests, the fruits of their arduous labor, are set ablaze. The golden wheat, the sturdy rye, the plump potatoes, all reduced to ash and smoke. You know, with a chilling certainty that settles deep in your bones, that famine is not a distant threat, but an inevitable, looming specter. The sight of the burning fields is not just a strategic act of war. It is a direct, personal assault on your family's future, on your very survival. The Soviet home front, far from the roar of cannons, has become a different kind of battlefield. A vast, silent expanse where the war is fought not with bullets, but with the insidious, relentless weapon of hunger. You taste the ash in the air, feel the despair in your heart, and know that the fight for survival has just begun. A quiet, desperate struggle against an enemy you cannot see, but whose presence you feel with every empty ache. You learn the new rules of this desperate game, rules that are etched not in stone, but in the harsh reality of scarcity. Unlike the idealistic notion of equal rationing sometimes spoken of in the West, where everyone received a similar, if diminished, share, your society implements a different, starker system. Rationing in the Soviet Union is not about equality. It is a cold, calculated distribution based on one brutal principle importance to the war effort. You understand, intellectually, the logic the war must be won, and those who directly contribute to that victory must be sustained. But emotionally, you feel the profound unfairness of it all. You see the tiers, clearly defined and cruelly enforced. At the top are the workers in heavy industry, the miners digging coal, the factory hands forging steel, the mechanics repairing tanks. They receive the most calories, the largest portions of the dwindling food supply. You watch them in the streets, perhaps a little more robust, a little less gaunt than others, and a flicker of envy, quickly suppressed by understanding, passes through you. They are the gears of the war machine, and they must be kept turning. Beneath them are those in less physically demanding roles, the white-collar clerks, the office workers, the teachers. Their rations are noticeably smaller, their hunger a more constant companion. You see the fatigue in their eyes, the careful movements as they conserve energy. And then, at the very bottom of this inverted pyramid of survival, are the children and other dependents, the elderly, the infirm, those who cannot directly contribute to the war effort. They receive the least. You hold your child's small, hungry hand, feeling the sharp pang of injustice as you realize that their portion is barely a whisper of sustenance. A cruel testament to the priorities of a nation fighting for its very existence. You come to know the numbers by heart, the grim statistics that define your daily struggle. An average of 1 pound of bread a day, if you are lucky enough to be in a category that receives it. For most, it's far less. And a mere 3 to 4 pounds of meat, if any at all, for an entire month. You might receive a small, hard piece of black bread, perhaps mixed with sawdust or other fillers, and you treat it like gold, savoring every crumb, making it last as long as humanly possible. The scent of it, even its meager texture, becomes a profound comfort. The thought of meat, a distant memory for many, becomes a luxury beyond imagination. This system, you understand, is designed for national survival, but it carves deep, invisible lines of division within your community, within your own heart. You watch your neighbor's children, just as hungry as yours, and feel the silent weight of this unequal burden. You learn to live with the perpetual ache, to conserve every calorie, to stretch every ration, knowing that your place in this hierarchy of hunger dictates the very limits of your endurance. The quiet, constant hum of the city is now underscored by the collective, unspoken plea for just a little more, a silent testament to the unequal distribution of scarcity. You realize, with a newfound clarity, that the fight for food extends beyond the ration card. It becomes a deeply personal, intimate struggle, transforming every available patch of earth, every spare moment, into a potential source of sustenance. Families like yours turn to what are now widely known as victory gardens. You see them everywhere, tiny plots carved out of parks, commandeered backyards, even small corners of city squares. The earth, usually reserved for flowers or grass, is now meticulously tilled, nurtured with desperate hope. You kneel in the dirt, your fingers calloused and stained, planting precious seeds. Potatoes, humble and resilient, become your primary hope. Beets, their deep red promising vital nutrients, are carefully tucked into the soil. Pumpkins, their large, sprawling vines, a symbol of potential abundance, are given prime space. Every sprout that pushes through the soil is a victory, a small miracle against the odds. You tend to these gardens with a fierce devotion, pouring all your remaining energy into coaxing life from the earth. The rhythm of planting, weeding, and watering becomes a meditative act, a quiet defiance against the hunger that threatens to consume you. You feel the cool soil between your fingers, smell the earthy scent of growing things, and for a moment, hope blossoms alongside the green shoots. Beyond the home front's personal efforts, you rely on the faint, fragile promise of government-run bakeries and canteens, known as stolovaya. These institutions are meant to provide bread and, occasionally, a warm, thin meal. You join the long queues, the lines stretching like weary ribbons through the streets, sometimes in the biting cold, sometimes under a relentless sun. The question that hangs unspoken in the air, a constant murmur in your mind and on the lips of those around you, is always the same. Will there be food today? You watch the faces of those ahead of you, searching for clues, for any hint of hope or despair. Sometimes the answer is a blessed yes, and you shuffle forward, clutching your ration card for a piece of dark, dense bread, or a spoonful of thin, watery soup. Other times, the chilling words echo down the line, "No more today," and you turn away, the gnawing emptiness in your stomach deepening, the despair a heavy cloak around your shoulders. You also learn the stark truth that Moscow, the distant capital, does not always dictate who eats. Often, it is the local officials, the men and women you see every day, who make the agonizing decisions about food distribution. They are the ones who weigh the needs of the factories against the needs of the hospitals, the pleas of the mothers against the demands of the soldiers. You might approach them, hat in hand, pleading for an extra ration for a sick child, and you see the burden of their choices etched on their faces. The fate of your family, your very survival, often rests in their tired, overburdened hands. This close, intimate knowledge of who holds the power over your daily bread adds another layer of complexity to your struggle. You walk home, the quiet crunch of your footsteps on the worn path echoing the gnawing emptiness within, the scent of the earth clinging to your hands, a silent prayer for tomorrow's harvest. You become aware, in whispers and through the arrival of strange, yet welcome, packages, of an unexpected lifeline stretching across vast oceans, from the distant United States. a nation once seen through a filter of ideological difference, comes a flood of aid, a tangible expression of solidarity in the face of a common enemy. This is the Lend-lease program, and it brings with it not just material for the war, but crucial food supplies. Over the course of the war, a staggering 4.5 million tons of food makes its way to the Soviet Union. A monumental effort that provides a desperately needed supplement to your dwindling domestic resources. You find yourself looking at the foreign labels, symbols of a world far removed from your own, with a mix of wonder and relief. Among these shipments, one item becomes truly iconic canned pork, lovingly nicknamed tushonka by your people. You recall the first time you see it, a sturdy tin can, often with a colorful label from an American company like Kroger or other unfamiliar brands. The very sight of it, the promise of actual meat, brings a flicker of hope to your weary eyes. This tushonka, a processed, fatty pork, is both deeply loved and grudgingly tolerated. You adore it because, quite simply, it keeps you alive. It provides protein, fat, calories, the very building blocks of survival that have become so scarce. You remember the taste, perhaps a little too greasy, a little too uniform, but undeniably nourishing. It becomes a staple, a regular appearance on the dinner tables of those lucky enough to receive it. A small victory against the ever-present threat of starvation. Yet, you also hate it. The monotony of it, day after day, week after week, eventually wears on your spirit. The greasy taste, the unvarying texture, the sheer predictability of it becomes a quiet burden. You long for fresh vegetables, for the varied flavors of your own traditional cuisine, for anything other than another spoonful of tushonka. But you eat it, always. You eat it because it means another day, another breath, another chance to fight on. It is a symbol of both salvation and sacrifice, a necessary evil that ensures your continued existence. Remarkably, some of these stout jars of tushonka, so well preserved, lasted for decades after the war's end. You hear stories, perhaps even witness it yourself, of families discovering forgotten tins in cellars or attics, still perfectly edible, consumed even into the 1990s. They are not just food, they are time capsules. Tangible reminders of a period of profound deprivation and the unexpected kindness from across the globe. You reflect on the incredible impact of this foreign aid. Without this steady stream of American food, particularly the high-calorie protein of the tushonka, the Red Army, which bore the brunt of the German invasion, might have simply collapsed from starvation. The strength and resilience of the soldiers at the front, and indeed, the very survival of your nation, was quietly, crucially, supported by these unassuming cans of pork. You feel a quiet gratitude for this distant aid, a silent acknowledgement of the interconnectedness of humanity in the face of such overwhelming darkness. You witness a strange, almost unsettling development as the war drags on and the food crisis deepens. In 1943, with traditional food sources decimated and the population teetering on the brink, the Soviet government turns to an unlikely source of hope: science. A desperate push begins to create invented foods, to coax sustenance from the most improbable of materials. It's an alchemy of survival, a testament to the sheer desperation of the times, where ingenuity and necessity become the mothers of invention. You hear the announcements, perhaps see the posters, proclaiming the triumph of science over scarcity. But in your heart, you feel a quiet unease. You learn about pine needle extract, a bitter, earthy concoction derived from the evergreen forests that cover so much of your land. This extract is hailed as a vital source of vitamin C, an essential nutrient to ward off scurvy, a disease that threatens to weaken the already starving population. You might be given a small, acrid dose, its sharp, resinous taste a stark reminder of the desperate times. It's not pleasant, but it's a form of medicine, a necessary evil to keep bodies functioning, to prevent the insidious creep of disease that stalks the undernourished. You swallow it, grimacing, but knowing it offers a tiny shield against the encroaching illness. Then there is yeast protein, a substance promising nutrition, yet delivering a taste that is universally described as disgustingly bitter. You remember the first time you try it, a strange, pasty substance, leaving a lingering, unpleasant aftertaste. It is meant to provide essential proteins to fortify weakened bodies. But the sheer unpleasantness of it makes every mouthful a chore, a grim battle of will against your own senses. It's food, yes, but food stripped of all joy, all pleasure, reduced to its barest, most functional form. You eat it because you must, because it represents a few precious calories, a slight reprieve from the gnawing hunger. But you do so with a heavy heart and a quiet sigh. Artificial survival becomes, in essence, official policy. The government, through its propaganda machine, attempts to spin these grim innovations as triumphs of Soviet science, a testament to your nation's ability to overcome any obstacle. The message is clear. We can nourish you with anything. Science is paraded not just as a tool for progress, but as a propaganda weapon, reassuring the populace that even in the most dire circumstances, a solution, however unpalatable, will be found. You read the news articles, listen to the radio broadcasts, and feel the conflicting emotions within you. On one hand, there is a glimmer of hope that these scientific endeavors might indeed keep you alive. On the other, there is a deep, underlying sorrow that your sustenance has been reduced to laboratory concoctions, a stark reflection of how far your society has fallen from a place of natural abundance. You walk through the streets, the faint, medicinal scent of pine needles sometimes wafting on the breeze, a quiet testament to the strange, scientific battle for survival. You begin to recognize a grim transformation taking place in the food served on your tables. The desperate alchemy of the scientists is one thing. But now, a more chilling culinary tradition begins to seep into the mainstream, the survival cuisine perfected in the notorious Gulag prison camps. These camps, where deprivation was a daily reality for millions, had long mastered the art of extracting every last calorie from the most meager and undesirable ingredients. Now, those same methods, those same dishes, once reserved for the incarcerated, begin to appear on the dinner plates of ordinary citizens like you. You feel a cold shiver run down your spine at the implications. You encounter balanda, a name that evokes a sense of dread. It's a thin, watery stew. Its primary ingredients often fish guts, scraps that would normally be discarded, combined with a bit of cabbage, perhaps a few wilting greens, or whatever else could be scavenged. You taste the muddy, briny flavor, the rough texture of scales or bone fragments, and you understand instantly the origin of this dish. It is the food of pure, unadulterated survival, designed to keep a body barely functioning, not to nourish or delight. You consume it slowly, deliberately, knowing that every spoonful, however unappetizing, means another moment of life. To thicken weak broths and extend the paltry portions, rusks, hard, dry pieces of stale bread, and millet become essential. You crumble the rusks into your thin soup, hoping they will absorb some of the liquid and create a more substantial meal. The millet, coarse and earthy, is boiled into a gruel, a monotonous but filling substance that provides a bare minimum of calories. You chew slowly, feeling the rough grains, and remember a time when millet was perhaps a side dish, not the entirety of your sustenance. And then there are shrodi, cakes made from seed husks, the outer coverings of grains and oilseeds, materials normally fed to animals, if used at all. You recall seeing these husks, once destined for livestock feed, now being processed, pressed, and baked into dense, almost inedible cakes. They are hard, fibrous, and taste faintly of dust and desperation. You force them down, feeling their rough texture scrape your throat, understanding that this is the very definition of the bottom of the barrel. This is what it means to be truly hungry, to consume what was once considered waste, to degrade your body just to keep your spirit tethered to life. What was once exclusive to the Gulag, a symbol of extreme punishment and dehumanization, is now served on Soviet dinner tables across the country. This stark reality serves as a chilling barometer of the nation's desperation. You look at your plate, at the shrodi or the balanda, and you reflect on the profound shift in your society. The lines between freedom and captivity, between normal life and extreme survival, have blurred almost beyond recognition. The quiet act of eating has become a stark, daily reminder of how far your world has fallen and how deeply you must fight for every breath. You hear the stories, whispered with a chilling reverence, of a city that became a living tomb, Leningrad. The very name evokes a cold, sharp ache in your heart. For 872 agonizing days, nearly 3 million people, including countless families like yours, were trapped in an iron grip under the brutal, relentless siege of Leningrad. You try to imagine the scale of it, the sheer, crushing weight of isolation and starvation that descended upon that proud city. The world outside could offer little relief, and you, inside, became witnesses to hell on earth. You listened to the accounts, perhaps from a survivor or through hushed radio broadcasts. Rations dropped to unimaginable lows. For children, the most vulnerable among you, the daily bread ration falls to a mere 150 grams, which is just over 5 ounces. You try to picture that amount, a sliver of dark, hard bread, barely enough to cover the palm of your hand, meant to sustain a growing child for an entire day. The thought is almost unbearable. You see the bread lines, stretching for miles through the snow-choked streets, twisting and turning like dark, macabre tapeworms, a constant, silent testament to the city's slow, agonizing demise. You join them, shivering, waiting for hours in the bitter cold, watching the faces around you grow thinner, more gaunt, etched with the deepest despair. In the depths of this desperation, human beings are pushed to unimaginable extremes. You hear tales, confirmed by the grim reality around you, of people resorting to eating anything that might offer a single calorie. Wallpaper paste, boiled until it became a thin, starchy gruel. Rats, once despised pests, now hunted as precious sources of protein, and in the darkest, most terrifying corners of human depravity. You hear whispers of cannibalism, of the ultimate taboo shattered by the absolute necessity of survival. You avert your eyes from certain individuals, from certain corners of the city. Too afraid to look. Too afraid to truly comprehend. The desperation leads to horrifying acts. Bodies, silent and cold, are sometimes hidden by families, their death concealed for days or even weeks, so that their ration cards can continue to be used. You understand the unthinkable logic, the desperate love and fear that would drive a parent to such an act, just to keep their living children alive for one more day. Yet, even amidst this universal suffering, the stark, brutal inequalities of your society persist. You hear the infuriating, heartbreaking rumors of elites in the Smolny, the city's administrative center, feasting on cakes and other luxuries, while outside their heavily guarded gates, 2,000 people die every single day. 2,000 lives extinguished, quietly, relentlessly, every 24 hours, while a select few indulge in a grotesque parody of normal life. You carry the images of Leningrad with you, a heavy burden on your soul. It is a testament to the absolute horror that hunger can unleash, a silent scream of suffering that reverberates through time. The quiet of that besieged city, broken only by the mournful cries of the hungry and the soft, crunching sound of footsteps on frozen snow, is a sound you will never truly forget. You emerge from the depths of those dark years, scarred but unbroken, carrying with you the indelible marks of the struggle. And as you slowly, tentatively, rebuild your life, certain foods come to embody not just sustenance, but the very spirit of survival. Among them, Kasha stands preeminent. This humble porridge, often made from millet or buckwheat, becomes a profound symbol, rooted deeply in both memory and endurance. You remember its warmth, its simple earthiness, the way it settled in your stomach, providing a quiet comfort in the face of so much uncertainty. Millet and pumpkin porridge, in particular, emerges as a staple, a consistent presence during the war and in the lean years that follow. You recall the way it was prepared, the grains slowly simmered with water. Perhaps a precious, thin sliver of pumpkin added for a touch of sweetness, a hint of color. It was simple, unpretentious, deeply nourishing. You remember the taste plain, yes, but life-saving. It was the food that kept you going, the fuel that allowed you to put one foot in front of the other, to endure another day, another week, another month. You feel its warmth in your memory, a quiet comfort that still lingers. Kasha is more than just food. It is a cultural touchstone, a dish that carries the weight of history in every spoonful. It is rooted in ancient traditions, a connection to the land and to generations past. But it is also forged in the crucible of this terrible war. It speaks of a deep, abiding resilience, an unwavering determination to find strength in simplicity, to persist against all odds. You understand why it holds such a special place in your heart and in the collective memory of your people. It is a testament to the power of the most basic sustenance to sustain not just the body, but the spirit. There is a saying that encapsulates the enduring truth of this dish, a phrase you hear whispered or spoken with a knowing nod. You can't spoil kasha with butter. It's an idiom that speaks to its inherent goodness, its fundamental nature, while butter, a luxury, would certainly enhance it. Kasha remains pure and wholesome in its simplest form. It is good on its own, a testament to its intrinsic value, a perfect metaphor for the inherent strength and dignity of your people, who, even without luxuries, found a way to survive. to thrive in their own quiet way. In the end, you realize that food on the Soviet home front during World War II was not merely sustenance. It was a weapon, wielded by the enemy to break your spirit. And it was also salvation. A quiet, daily miracle that allowed you to fight on. Through ration cards, scorched earth, invented foods, and the desperate resourcefulness that brought forth dishes like hummus, Kasha, your nation endured. You close your eyes, the quiet hum of your surroundings, a gentle backdrop, and you reflect on the incredible human capacity for survival. A quiet, persistent fire that burns even in the deepest darkness. And perhaps, somewhere in the quiet of history, the echoes of those hungry days still whisper, reminding us of the profound strength found in a simple bowl of porridge, and the enduring resilience of the human heart.